Hey there, Fellowship family. Welcome to your one-stop shop for all things church life. I'm Mark Francis, once again, your host for today. Excited to be back in the seat here with a couple of my friends for another episode. And if you were able to tune in or watch or listen to the previous episode that we released here on this podcast channel, I would encourage you to go back and listen to it if you missed it. Really, the role of elders and deacons and hearing from some of those guys here was exciting, and just being able to recommend people. But we want to react here in this episode to our most recent congregational meeting, which we called a fellowship family meeting. So I want to even unpack that. But let me introduce who I have sitting to my right and left. I have the host of the Sermon Spotlight. I have the youth director, am I saying that right? Student Ministries director.
Hey, you call me whatever you want, buddy.
Keystone. What else is there? This is Caleb Pearson, your one and only Caleb Pearson.
I love listening to you host, man.
Oh.
Thank you for being here.
No.
I love it. I'm rarely in this chair.
Sit in that chair for today's episode. And over here on the other side is Executive Pastor John Van Drunen.
Thank you.
How are you?
It's good to be here with you.
You call it out even louder.
JVD.
So there's a history to that, right? Is Caleb Pearson the one who coined that phrase? Is that the rumor? Is that true?
It comes from the Pearson household. I don't remember who was the first one within the Pearsons, but
My mom, basically.
Oh.
If she heard that he gave me credit for it, she'd be so mad.
JVD.
Yeah, but anyway, JVD.
I was in a meeting earlier today with a pastor who, leave him. Well, I'll name him. Charlie Spencer. Called you JVD. So it has gone all the way up the chain to the head pastor's level there, where even children's pastors are calling you JVD. Yes,
it's the common, and elders will refer to me at times as JVD as well. So it's okay. It's
efficient.
Embraced.
Well, that is your introduction here. That's a long introduction. I appreciate it. And here's the thing that we really felt passionate about to make this episode, because the family meeting, if you were not able to attend, it was incredible. I enjoyed it. There was a buzz in the room. There were almost 300 people there. The content that was shared was, I think, what people were looking for. And I want to have some reaction to it. So, Caleb, I'll turn your way. You were on the stage. You and Alicia did a great job of hosting. So you kind of were thrown in the mix towards the end. John, I know you were really integral in planning this, as you do with any congregational meeting. But Caleb, I'll come your way just from that perspective of what you heard, saw, and experienced.
Yeah, I was so encouraged by everything that was said. I was encouraged by the conversations I had after. I have been to those meetings ever since I started my mentorship over 4 years ago now. But there was something about this past Sunday night that gave me an opportunity to see people I wouldn't ordinarily see. And what I mean by that is it is hard to talk with people on a Sunday morning, perhaps as much as you'd like to. I mean, everyone's all over the place, right? And then the majority of the time I'm rubbing shoulders with anybody else, I'm serving alongside them, which again is also good. But these meetings are literally just to come together as a family. Like that's the point, right? And so I liked the freedom in that to while there was dessert, while there were people talking, to meet people I hadn't met before, talk to people I hadn't seen before in a while, solely for the purpose of unity in the body, and not doing something and then being reminded of the unity in the body.
It's one of those opportunities where if you are an attender of a specific venue, let's just say Fellowship Saturday or Fellowship 3 even, where you see the same core group of people in that venue all the time, the tendency and the fear is that it's exclusionary, and you don't have the sense of the unity of one body of Fellowship Bible Church. Here, this is one of those opportunities that, I mean, you can count a lot of different things, baptisms, or, whether it be your kids go to a vacation Bible school together or follow the star. There's plenty of all church things. This is one of those all church things where we can really come together and experience that.
Absolutely. And that was part of and I give all credit to our elder leadership, and this idea of maintaining this focus on relational discipleship. And I like to use the term authentic fellowship, which is really very much the same idea of how are we coming together? And if we're going to continue to put that call out for the body, we have to be able to model that in what we do. And so really this idea of we're a family. a lot of people think of the church as a building. No, the church is a people, and we're a family, and we have to come together just like families come together to be able to talk through things and get those updates and hear from one another. And so that was really encouraging.
Hence the name of this podcast. Fellowship Family Podcast. I mean, so we want to be able to use this as a platform to share kind of what's going on with the family of our church. And John, I'll ask you a question because it wasn't really addressed in the meeting, but the heart of why this meeting really came to the forefront. I remember me being the event planner that I am. You said the elders want to do something different and special, and they want to have a different meeting. It's going to be the congregational meeting, but they want it to be different. Where was the kind of impetus of that to coming to the forefront to say, we have something important we want to share and make it different?
Yeah. Well, I'd say this is we're in the process of, on the other side of COVID. And so we're continuing to see people come back to the church from online. And so that's just been encouraging to see. And I would say part of this goes back to a couple of weeks ago, the elders and pastoral staff were able to get away for 2 days to really focus in on this next season that we're entering. And above all, to make sure that we're all on the same page. And that there's unity in that process, and really to look back at what is it that that Fellowship Bible Church has been about as a church, and looking at the report from the Transition Task Force that gave their report recently, but then comparing that back to documents from 2013. And plans and resources from 1995 and even earlier. And that's where those core elements of who are we as a church, and we have to continually remind ourselves, because it's easy to lose sight of that in the midst of special events and different programs. But who are we as a church? And we're really about three things, and that's our corporate gatherings together, what we do each weekend, coming together. This idea of sound biblical exegetical teaching, as we've done through the Biblical Training Center and other venues in small groups and other events, but and as well as our corporate gatherings. But then the third is community groups. And so this idea of really continuing to pour in on that front, it's really important. Not to mention, we have these staffing transitions coming up. And that all leads to, we have to just continue to communicate, and we want to do this in a way that is engaging for folks, not something that it's just a rote experience. And so I appreciate both of your involvement in making that possible this time.
Yeah, and I have this renewed energy, and there's a different sense of kind of a buzz happening and momentum going on in the church right now post-COVID. And I think that's been a worry for the leadership and for the church of A, who's attending our church? B, are they still attending if we thought they were? And then C, are there new people that we don't even know? And so how the elders have that burden of shepherding the body really begins with the corporate gatherings. And Mark pointed out kind of 4 challenges that are going on in the church. I would almost summarize some of that to where I got the sense of, even for us at FBC, that there's a lack of valuing the local body. And I would add to kind of Mark's challenge of saying, how can we better value our own local family and our own local body? And so that's where I'm getting the renewed energy of feeling that post-COVID, this is going on. There is an excitement, and people are gathering together and seeing the energy after the meeting with the dessert and the conversations, Caleb, you were talking about. There's, I think, some momentum that, yes, we're getting back to a healthy state of a church where we went many weeks without even gathering.
Well, and I'll maybe even go a little further, Mark, in that I think there's a valuing, how do we love the church? One of our 5 core values, which I think we'll go through here and just refresh everybody. What are those 5 core values? But beyond that is, how are we, through our love for God and our love, I'm just going to name them here, our love for God, love for biblical truth, our love for the family, and our love for the church, how do we base on those loves, how are we loving the world? How are we deployed in where we're working, living, playing, socializing? How are we deployed in engaging the communities around us? Scott Santmeyer reminded me the other day that within 5 years, 3 to 5 years, most believers do not have a group of unbelievers that they interact with any longer. And so we need to be in the world, not of the world, but in the world, engaging and sharing the hope that we have in Christ.
And that's part of discipleship.
Absolutely.
Which is, I found that was kind of the heartbeat of the meeting of discipleship and getting outside of ourselves, getting outside of these walls.
Well, and that's one reason I wanted to do a youth skit too, was to have these kids be a part of that family meeting. And as they are the present and future of the church, and we encourage Keystone to attend as well. To half the people attending from Keystone were just interested in learning more about Fellowship Bible Church. And the other half was ready to, what's going on with these transitions? And that's something you guys alluded to, which is another reason I think this family meeting came at a perfect time, because we're close to these transitions, right? Everybody's kind of known they're coming. Mark's been alluding to it from up front and all that, but to hear you especially break down and talk through it and demonstrate the care and the intentionality that the elders have been putting into it, so that it's not a family meeting in the sense that dad senses a crisis, so all the kids run to the couch and we solve a major problem.
Right.
But instead, it's a time of encouragement, a time of coming together and reminding ourselves God is so much bigger than all of this stuff, and all of this stuff is good. And it's a time to celebrate, and it's a time to look forward. And so the whole time, and as I wasn't speaking, I was still sitting there, and I got to watch. I always hear the pastor on Sermon Spotlight say this. Yeah. I get to watch the audience experience God. Mike Lucan says that all the time. I get to watch people experience God. And I felt that Sunday evening, which was really cool.
Yeah. And I'd like to just further unpack the idea of discipleship, because again, that was the heartbeat of the meeting. And I'm sure we can use the Sermon Spotlight question: what was left on the cutting room floor? How can we best champion discipleship amongst our body beyond just a family meeting that lasted a little over an hour? What is really the true call to each individual that attends Fellowship Bible Church?
Yeah. And that's I appreciate you asking that, Mark. And part of this is, what is discipleship? We kind of put it up on this really high shelf, and we have varying definitions of what does it mean to be discipled? Is it going through a Bible study? What does that really mean? And one of the things that was really helpful for us to do and think through from an internal standpoint is, what does that mean for us as a church? And really understanding that what that really means in its essence is that we are growing to be more like Christ. And that's an ongoing process, and it's not relegated to a Bible study. It's not relegated to a community group. But it's a life on life that we're experiencing, and we're interacting with one another. We're sharing our challenges with one another. And so, your question of what's our next step? What's the next step? Well, that's been a big question for a lot of people over the years. And so that's where this idea of creating a path of discipleship really becomes necessary to help people understand that this is an ongoing process. You're never done growing as a disciple, and in this life at least. And so how do we really do that well? Well, I will say one of the things I talked about is that we have generally kind of viewed that as a discipleship as a self-serve buffet within the church, and just provide a large selection and variety of different options, and let people pick and choose however they want to take those next steps. And that's been helpful for some. I know how much I have grown and benefited from the time that I came here in 2008, and have just really appreciated that. But how do we do this better as a church to help people understand why they should be taking the next step, and what what the preferred next steps really look like. And now you can do that and be really legalistic about it. But I think people know us well enough to know that, no, this is something that you hold loosely, that you lift up and say, no, these are the next steps we'd like you to take. And part of that is helping people go through the process to become a member at Fellowship Bible Church. What is it that we believe as a church? Why are community groups so important? And so we have this idea of assimilation. I like to use the word congregational engagement rather than assimilation. But this idea of how does the congregation get engaged into the life of the church? Because after all, it's a body of people with relationships. That is the church. It's not a building. It's not an institution. And it's easy to institutionalize things, especially the larger the church.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, that it's an ongoing process of discipleship. That it doesn't, there's no starting, well, there's a starting point, but there's no ending point, really.
Right.
And it's a continuum. So wherever you are on this vertical thermometer spectrum of growth, that's the call of to grow, connect, and to serve. And there should be this internal growing, connecting, serving, but then there's the push to look outside of yourself and to look outside of these walls of FBC that you're talking about. So that fifth core value of loving the world. And doing that doesn't necessarily have to be going on a mission trip. That would be great, but it can be your neighborhood. It can be the people that you know. And so how do we continue down this path of growth where it exudes to others around us?
The ditch to fall into is you make it programmable, but that's not what we're after, right? It's supposed to be personal and authentic fellowship, right? And raise the value of the congregation being able to do that and have a spiritual lens for first-time guests and people maybe you haven't interacted with. And that's what, again, Sunday evening was so cool to see as the elders and pastors came up. It wasn't a suit and tie, here's my speech. There were breaks of recognizing somebody in attendance and sharing a way they were encouraged by them. And there was even some talk back and forth. It felt like a family chatting.
Right.
And that, for me and some of my peers, there was a little bit of, these people know each other. These people love each other. And it seems that what best enabled them to do that is being a part of this church. Interesting, right? And so we create a culture of, man, I want to be a part of this. And I think that happened naturally. That was not on Alicia and I's paper. That was not on John's paper when he got up there. Mark and Morrison, although some would disagree, they didn't plan to insult each other. It just comes naturally, right? Because they love each other like brothers. And it's a family meeting.
Yeah. Well, and what's neat, and I think this kind of strikes, so I mentioned membership as one of those elements within the context of Connect, Grow, Serve. But it's way beyond that. And how do we do that? But I think one of the things you've touched on, Caleb, is this idea of how are we better as a church into welcoming people into the life of the church and greeting people and really having good relationships. I had the opportunity to interact with a couple about a month or two ago, and they kind of had a dour look, and then said, "Hi, my name is John," and they introduced themselves, and pretty soon just lightened up, and there was a smile and joy in their countenance, and that was just really encouraging to see. And I think part of that is nobody had really had a chance to connect with them yet, and I think we often overlook that. Of how do we do that as a church? And we have a desire to do that. I was told once by somebody that they decided that they were going to come to FBC initially because they wanted to get in, get out, and not get involved. And to me, that broke my heart. And I'm glad to see them getting involved in the life of the church now. But it's one of those things that we have to recognize that that's a challenge. And so we have an opportunity as a church, each of us, to be that joy, that encouragement, that next connection. And so just taking those opportunities is worth a whole lot more than we probably even think.
And it's what you do as a family member when you're in your house and you have somebody over. I've heard this analogy, but it's worth repeating. When you have a guest over to your house, you make sure that things are all situated and set up, and you might have food ready, and you might have, something on the table for them when they come in, and you welcome them, and you bring them into your house, and you serve them, and you make sure that they're comfortable. And can't we all view this as our house?
Right.
And so how can we be on the lookout for those people who are our guests? And I want to bring this to a head where we can actually make this tangible. So have this conversation end with a tangible example. And again, I really feel this momentum building. If you listened to the Sermon Spotlight a couple weeks ago, John Morrison gave a great story of how a person served him recently who 29 years ago came to FBC and was on the doorsteps of leaving, but somebody tapped and said, let's come to lunch. We want to go to lunch. That is momentum. We're in these kind of hall room conversations here at the church where things are happening. I want to bring us to Easter because Easter is around the corner, guys. We're basically a week away from Good Friday. We are just 9 days away from Easter. What does this conversation mean to you where you have the ability of bringing in somebody to this house of Fellowship Bible Church to experience a family atmosphere where God is on display? And Mike Lucan said this recently in a meeting where we're having these same conversations. He said, and he's quoting other people, but in his words, the assembly is one of the largest ways and best ways to display God to an unbelieving world. The fact that believers of all different backgrounds and generations and ethnicities and races and creeds, you name it, are all coming together to worship a one triune God in an assembly that is proclaiming his excellencies. And the pinnacle of that is Easter and the resurrection. So how can we as a church build that momentum to think about, not just think about who is on our minds to invite, but how do we really take it to the next level of personally bringing somebody? I mean, you can invite them, get them to breakfast beforehand. You can suggest you meet them at the doorsteps when they come here in the parking lot. You can even go pick them up. I mean, so this is the challenge, I think, for our body right now with this momentum, is saying, where are we as a church of not just doing this together as believers, but where's the world around us to experience God?
And I think a big part of that, Mark, is we've got to be engaged with those around us, and to be able to have those relationships, to be able to invite people. I was reminded at Christmas of the power of the invitation, and somebody had asked would it be okay if their family came to join us for Christmas Eve? Well,
they asked you.
They asked me, and I'm like, you totally beat me to the punch. But they had come before, and they said that was the most meaningful thing that their family had ever done, and gotten feedback that their family really enjoyed coming to celebrate Christmas Eve with us. And so, and this is somebody that I get a chance to every couple months to see. It's not in a frequent contact scenario, but it was neat to be able to have that interaction. So I think so often we think like, well, people know they can come here. Well, maybe not. And so don't underestimate the power of the shoulder tap or the invitation, and asking somebody, would you like to join me?
It makes a big church feel smaller. I'd encourage people to take 20 minutes on either side of a service and stick around and engage with somebody before you head out. Right? It's so easy to think about which service are we going to, which is good. You got to figure that out, right? But remember, it's so much more than that service. And if we're trying to create this family environment, everyone should be leaving with a very clear picture of who the Father is. And it ain't Mark Carey, and it's not Mike Lukens. And if there's church hopping or church shopping going on, that's oftentimes what we get is, this pastor, this worship. Hopefully they're not leaving thinking, wow, Mark, Mike, JVD, Mark, Caleb, they're awesome. Wow. God is huge. Oh, that's more likely. That's way more likely, right? But they leave saying, wow, God, something's going on there. They leave with God on their mind.
And it's the people around them, not the people on the stage,
right?
Who are really doing that work of engaging.
Dude, so I grew up in this church, okay? Yep. And I have a vivid memory of being old enough to remember this. So I don't know, somewhere between 8, 9, 10, 11. My dad said, when we get to church, it's Easter Sunday, you're going to hear a lot of people say, he is risen. And then a lot of people respond with, he is risen indeed. And I encourage you to not shy away from an adult that's going to come up to you and say, he is risen. He is risen. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I started walking around the sanctuary and keeping track of every time I heard somebody say, he is risen. And then I'd keep track of whether or not somebody said, he is risen indeed. And so I would walk around the church and hear all these different people say it. And I have such a memory of, Mark saying it as part of the service, but then everyone else was saying it. And it was just the body of Christ doing this Easter thing. Mm-hmm. And that it was so hard to remove myself from that and not feel the community of it. I'm like, Dad, you're right. They're all saying it, and it was just so cool. So I don't know why that came to my mind, but we want to be a light, not just from the stage, but from the chair.
And from my worship team hat, we are putting God on display, not any one person, not anything else, not the production, not the songs and the way that they're done and the style. It is, we're putting God on display. And another quote that I've heard in the past is, what you present is what will keep them. So if you are presenting smoke, lights, mirrors, a big show and a performance, you continually have to keep that going to keep the people. If you put God on display and present God to people that show up, that is what is going to cause them to stick. And who is displaying God? It's the believers around. It is the body of Christ coming together, unified in an assembly. So,
and I just want to say, in light of that, it's not just on Easter,
right?
How are we living in light of the resurrection hope that we experience and that joy? Are we dour and pessimistic? There's enough in this world to be pessimistic about.
You'll find it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But are we living in the hope of Christ? Do we have that renewal in our life to see the joy coming out and how we carry ourselves, how we conduct ourselves, what we say, what we engage in, and how we engage with people?
Yep, absolutely. All right, Kay, I'm putting my iPad down. It is time to recite what is happening next week at FBC.
Do it.
Are you on the spot? Do you want to do this?
No, I thought you were about to do it.
Absolutely. So
you're the man.
Good Friday, there's 2 services. Okay, so there's 11 o'clock and 7 o'clock. We are going to be live streaming, but guys, come on out. Make it happen. Absolutely. We're going to be celebrating communion during Good Friday. So be prepared to let that be the climax and pinnacle of the service, to celebrate the death and the cross and what Christ has done for us. Then Easter. We have a Saturday night service, typical fellowship Saturday, 5 o'clock, right? Where there's children's ministry available
children's
there.
Ministry.
John, I'll turn you, give you a pop quiz.
No.
Then Sunday morning, guys. Okay, Sunday morning, 4 services, right?
Yes.
2 different venues, upstairs and downstairs. The upstairs is 8, 9:30, and 11.
Yes.
And we have children's ministry at 9:30 and 11 o'clock. And then fellowship 3, and to stay in sync with upstairs, is changing their time, and it's 11 o'clock downstairs. And so, guys, that's the lineup. And so the call to action is, where are you with that? And who do you know that needs to be a part of this and see God on display on any given weekend? But how about Easter?
Yes, so, absolutely. And I'll echo Mark's comments that we want to have you in person. We recognize there are some people that are homebound and have been able to worship with us. And so did you want to just mention
the live stream is 9:30 on Sunday.
It's going to be 9:30 service on Sunday for Easter as well.
Yep.
So
absolutely. Well, guys, thanks for watching and listening. And once again, we just challenge you to give us feedback. Tell us what's happening. Part of
share
what
a story
we didn't even cover today, but is we want to hear from you, and we want stories to be prominent around here in the church body so we can encourage each other. And this is a great platform to do that. So let us know. You can go to fbcva.org/share your story and make that happen. You can also find us with fbcva.org/podcasts. All the different platforms. Share us. Let us know what's going on in your world and life. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for being a part of the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
It's amazing. And so until we do this again, let's let Christ be the center of our lives each and every day.